All right, so let's finish up our chemistry unit here, talking a little bit about biomolecules. All right, those are those four organic substances that we just talked about in the last video. So, again, I got a little video on biomolecules, so I want you to click on that and watch I want you to go and watch that with the Amoeba Sisters. I'm not going to show it to you right now in this. All right, so what are the functions of carbohydrates? They act as a food reserve molecule. Right? They store energy for you. All right. They are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay. Remember, they're organic, so they have to have carbon and hydrogen. All right. What makes up a carbohydrate? Something called a simple sugar or a monosaccharide. I talked about the glucose. Glucose is a monosaccharide. If you put two glucose together, you have maltose, which is a disaccharide. Right? So some examples, right? Glucose and starch. Lipids. Lipids are fats and oils. Right? Again, they act as a food reserve. They're mostly carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. There's some other things in there. The building blocks. What makes up lipids? Fatty acids and glycerol. Right, you got to remember both of those. Some examples, clean out your ears. That's a lipid. That's a fat. Cholesterol. You've heard of cholesterol. It can build up inside your arteries and clog them up and all that kind of stuff. And the cell membrane. Right, that's a fatty layer. Okay, and you can see a little diagram there showing the lipid cross-cut with a protein, and then the carbohydrate attached to that. All right, you can see that the lipid has a head and a tail, and it's a double layer. Proteins. Proteins make enzymes and cell parts. That's their job. You ever watch bodybuilders? They talk about they need protein to build muscle, right? Because that's what proteins help us do. Right? Again, made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, other things. Right? What makes up proteins? Something called an amino acid. You may have heard of those. Okay. And some examples of proteins: skin, enzymes, hormones. Those are all proteins. Right? And then finally, our last biomolecule is nucleic acids. They carry the hereditary information for genetics, for passing on information to offspring. You can see pretty much same stuff with some phosphorus in there. Nucleic acids are made up of nucleotides. The words even begin NUC, right? Nucleic acids, nucleotides. And what makes up a nucleotide? It's got three parts. It's a phosphate, it's a sugar, and it's a nitrogen base. And we'll talk about DNA a little later in the course. Right? All right. So some examples are DNA and RNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. The word's right in there, nucleic acid. Or RNA is ribonucleic acid. Right? And we're going to talk about those when we talk about DNA and heredity and things like that. Okay. All right, we're going to finish up with digestion and synthesis. All right, digestion. Another word for digestion is hydrolysis, breaking stuff down. All right, large food molecules get broken down into simpler ones so that they can be used by the body. Also makes transporting them around the body easier. Okay? So here's a little graphic representation. You can see on the left, we've got a larger particle, and during the process of digestion, it breaks it down into smaller particles. What do we get when we digest proteins? We get amino acids. We already said the building blocks of proteins are amino acids. So if we break down a protein, we're going to get the amino acids that make it up. Okay? Digestion of starch results in simple sugars. Okay? Starch is that carbohydrate. Right? You may have heard starch is in pasta. There's a lot of starch. Okay? If you break down the fats, the lipids, you're going to get the fatty acids and the glycerols. Notice that what you're getting is the building block. It's just going in a different direction, that's all. All right, synthesis. Synthesis means making something. To synthesize means to make something. Okay, so here we're combining a simpler substance into a more complex substance. So for example, combining amino acids to make proteins that the body can now use for food. Okay? So in order to synthesize proteins, you need amino acids. You need those building blocks. In order to synthesize or make starch, you need simple sugars. In order to make a fat, you need a fatty acid and a glycerol. All right? So that's the end of our chemistry unit.